Chapter 480, The Godly Ice Explosion. At the same time, he wanted to see if the Sun Moon Empire had installed any spiritual barriers inside the Heavenly Soul Empire's Imperial Palace. If they did, the place in which they did so had to be the most important. Either an important figure or object was bound to be there. He wasn't afraid of being discovered. He was confident in his ability to flee this place quickly. He instantly unleashed his spiritual detection, and the three-dimensional structure of the entire palace appeared in his head. He squinted his eyes and sensed the slight changes around him. He also fully imprinted the three-dimensional structure of the palace in his mind using his immense spiritual power. This would be important for his next visit here. Indeed, just like he had expected, he detected 3 places where spiritual powers interacted. This meant that there were spiritual barriers in those 3 places. Those 3 places were all located near the center of the palace. However, no alarm sounded. The palace was very quiet, as if the spiritual barriers that had been touched didn't have any effect at all. Huo Yuao wasn't complacent at all. After detecting for 3 seconds, he instantly shut off his spiritual detection. At the same time, he quickly unleashed his spiritual interference domain and used his spiritual avatar to leave behind a streak of his spiritual power to maintain his spiritual interference where he was. He instantly teleported 50 meters away before fleeing in a direction that he had identified earlier. He had found out many things after that brief period of spiritual detection. Indeed, a few seconds after he teleported away, 2 black figures had already silently come to where he was. A huge black web, carrying a slightly fishy smell, fell from the sky and instantly engulfed the streak of spiritual power that Huo Yuao left behind. His spiritual power immediately dissipated and disappeared. His spiritual interference domain also vanished, and everything turned dark once again. What? A slightly surprised sound resonated. Following this, 2 figures fell to the ground. What's going on? There's no one. An elderly-sounding voice was heard. The other person was also puzzled, and said, "This shouldn't be the case. Earlier, I sensed that the person unleashing his spiritual power was over here. I can't be wrong. This person's spiritual power is strong. He might be a spiritual type titled Douluo. I didn't expect someone as strong as him among the remaining losers in the Heavenly Soul Empire. However, he's very sensitive. After discovering our spiritual barrier, he quickly fled. But it's not so easy for him to flee. The voice of this person talking was very sharp, but their gender was unclear. His frail figure was concealed by a black veil. The person beside him was a tall and large elder. His sinister gaze was still flashing amidst the darkness. He had long, greyish hair that flowed behind his back, while his burly figure was also concealed by his black clothing. There was an image of a ball of white flame on their chests. Come, let's follow his spiritual aura to find him. He can't escape. The frail man in black snorted coldly, and a deep purple halo was released from his body. This halo was like an oscillation as it spread outward. During this process, slight oscillations appeared in the direction that Huo Yuao had escaped from earlier. Oh, this fellow seems to be able to teleport. I only discovered traces of him 50 meters away. It's a pity that it's me. Humph. Let's go and chase him. As he spoke, the frail man in black immediately leapt up and charged into the sky like a bolt of lightning. He pursued Huo Yuao in the direction that he had escaped in. The other elder followed closely behind him with his toes touching the ground. He let out intense white light from his body. At the same time, 9 soul rings rose from beneath his feet. The colors of these 9 soul rings were very weird. 2 of them were yellow, 2 of them were purple, and 5 were black. It was an ordinary combination of colors, but each soul ring had a blurry layer of color on it. This caused the original, bright colors of the soul rings to become much dimmer. This was especially so for the 5 black soul rings. If not for the fact that they could be compared to the pitch black clothing he was in, the difference in their colors might actually be overlooked. Without a doubt, this elder was a titled Douluo, whereas the frail man in black was actually surrounded by a layer of distorted light. Traces of yellow, purple, and black could be seen, but it was unclear how many soul rings he possessed. The 2 figures quickly chased in a specific direction. Very soon, they came to the small lakeside that Huo Yuao had used to hide. While the Heavenly Soul Empire's Imperial Palace was very expansive, that was mainly because of the structures in the palace. For powerful soul masters like Huo Yuao, they quickly came to the boundaries of the palace as they unleashed their full strength. Huo Yuao was above the lake. If he moved forward any further, he would be within the range of the surveillance soul tools surrounding the palace. His spiritual detection was still in use. Due to his all-around detection earlier, he clearly knew where all the spiritual barriers were. Right now, he just needed to move his spiritual detection around those 3 spiritual barriers, and the entire palace would basically be under his detection. He naturally discovered the 2 people that were chasing him. The 2 of them were very quick. That elder was a titled Douluo. As for the other man, Huo Yuao was unable to clearly tell. However, the other guy had to at least be an advanced tier soul Douluo if he wasn't a titled Douluo, judging from his spiritual undulations. Evil soul master. A cold grin surfaced at the corner of Huo Yuao's lips. Following this, he charged straight towards a wall of the palace. At this moment, he seemed not to care about being discovered by the surveillance soul tools. Ring ring ring. Deafening alarms sounded in the next moment. The entire palace was alarmed. Beams of light subtly appeared in the sky. Evidently, the aerial surveillance soul tools were scanning in this direction. Not only this, beams of soul rays started to surface from above the palace walls. They were all sweeping towards his direction. The Sun Moon Empire did well in erecting a defense as strong as this, even though they had only occupied the Heavenly Soul Empire for a short period of time. A cold and mysterious look appeared on Huo Yuao's face. He twisted his body in the air before his soul thrust lit up. Instantly, he charged towards the streets outside the palace. He unleashed his imitation and immediately disappeared. Even if there were oscillation detectors, they still needed time to adjust and come over. By the time they arrived, Huo Yuao would be long gone. It was impossible to follow him directly, given that his imitation was in use. 2 figures were also chasing him at great speed. Just as they flew above the lake, tremendous boom sounded. Boom! The entire lake seemed to have been mined with countless bombs. A terrifying explosion ensued, and almost the entire Heaven Do City could hear them. Amidst the resonating booms, the lake became the most frightening explosive. Countless ice flakes flew everywhere, and the immense explosive force blew apart the layer of ice that had formed on the surface of the lake. This explosion was too sudden. There weren't any clues before it happened. When it occurred, the frail man in black and the elder were both astonished. They were both pure soul masters, thus they didn't have any automatic defensive soul tools on them. When the explosion occurred, they could only subconsciously circulate their soul power to resist it. Both their bodies were instantly flung high up into the air. The frightening explosive force continued to surge upwards as the lake instantly expanded to 5 times its original size. The huge structures around it were immediately taken down by this explosion. Even the wide and thick palace walls collapsed. The strength of this explosion was equivalent to an all-out attack from an ice-type titled Douluo. Although Huo Yuao was a soul sage, he had been accumulating power there for almost an hour. He had drained a lot of his soul power before he completed his ice explosion technique. In addition, he had frozen the lake water into ice beforehand. The entire process took a lot of effort. He wanted to achieve a result just like this. The surrounding distorted lights around the frail soul master disappeared following the explosion, revealing his 8 soul rings. He was already coughing up blood in the air. When Huo Yuao had escaped earlier, he sneakily stuck close to the lake's surface as he flew. For this frail soul master to follow his spiritual trail, he naturally had to follow Huo Yuao's escape route closely. This was why both of them were almost at the center of the explosion, and were sent high up into the air by Huo Yuao's ice explosion technique. The elder was faring much better, given that he was a titled Douluo. Although he was caught unawares, he still relied on his abilities to neutralize most of the impact. The other soul master wasn't so fortunate. He was only a soul Douluo, and he was a spiritual type soul master. He wasn't adept at defense. As a result, he was immediately hurt critically by the explosion. His legs were blown off, and his soul power also became very messy in his body. The excruciating pain caused his aura to turn into a huge mess. He was already screaming tragically in the air. Blood was flowing from his pores. Fortunately, his cultivation was rather strong, which saved his life. If he were only a soul sage, he would have lost his life to Huo Yuao's accumulated ice explosion technique. That titled Douluo's face was also covered in ash from the explosion. Although his limbs weren't blown off, the shirt he was wearing was in tatters now. He spat out blood in the air, and his blood quickly turned into ice before falling to the ground. Both he and that frail soul master were evil soul masters. When evil soul masters were influenced by their own evil strength, they would become very self-centered. Naturally, the titled Douluo couldn't bother with the other soul master right now. As he tried to stabilize himself in the air, he quickly unleashed a defensive soul skill and hid within a layer of thick gray grayish fog. At the same time, he quickly retreated. The other soul master couldn't adapt at all. As he was critically hurt, he had already fallen from the nearby. He was flailing as he tried to circulate his soul power to control his body. However, he couldn't do it in the end. At this moment, he suddenly chilled down his body. This chill didn't come from the temperature of the outside world. It originated from his own senses. As a spiritual type soul Douluo who was an evil soul master, his senses had always been very acute. When this feeling came, he realized that something was amiss. He desperately screamed, "Save me!" The elder who was rapidly retreating heard his call the moment he exited the radius of the remaining shockwaves of the explosion. After hearing his calls, he was furious. It was because of him that they were caught in the ambush. Aren't you just falling from the sky? Don't tell me you'll fall to death even though you're a soul Douluo. Why are you screaming so loud? Even if you're hurt badly, your injuries aren't lethal. The elder had no intention of saving him at all. However, it was also at this moment that he was shocked to find out that the dark sky seemed to have slightly distorted in the space a little ways away from the man in black. Following this, a beam of golden light flashed before it penetrated the head of the frail man in black. The frail man's body was quickly shriveling up as he fell from the sky, and that golden light also revealed its true appearance. It was a long spear that was sharp on both sides. The spear exuded blinding, petrifying golden light. Disastrous. The title Douluo seemed to have realized something. His figure quickly flashed before he charged straight towards the sky. However, that beam of golden light vanished in the next instant. Following this, there seemed to be a distorted figure that flashed past. In the next moment, everything returned to normal once again. Scoundrel. The title Douluo shouted furiously, and a huge patch of thick grayish fog pursued that distorted figure. Wherever it passed, blasting sounds resonated through the air. However, his attacks were evidently futile. He could only hit the air. When that frail man in black was killed, he realized that the enemy's target was that frail man in black. The reason was very simple. He was adept at spiritual abilities. From the start until the end, they had not seen the appearance of the enemy. However, without a doubt, this enemy was a spiritual type soul master. Of course, in the eyes of the title Douluo, the enemy was a spiritual type title Douluo. To this enemy, this elder wasn't the true threat. This was because he could conceal himself, even given the elder's cultivation, and even if he unleashed all his senses, he could only discover his enemy within a certain region. On the other hand, that soul Douluo was different. With him around, it was like having a pair of eyes. It was much easier dealing with the spiritual type title Douluo. Obviously, the spiritual type title Douluo wanted to kill the soul Douluo, because that would greatly reduce their control over him. There were very few spiritual type martial souls in the world of soul masters. There weren't many spiritual type soul masters, even in the Holy Ghost Church. There were more spiritual type evil soul masters compared to ordinary soul masters. However, in just a few years, 3 of them had already died. It was important to know that these evil soul masters were very crucial to the Holy Ghost Church, even though they had very weird temperaments. This rank 87 spiritual type soul Douluo had now died. How could they possibly catch the enemy now? Indeed, the person who had killed the soul Douluo was Huo Yuao. After he charged out from the palace, he found the most appropriate time to use his ice explosion technique with the help of his spiritual detection. As for turning back to attack, it was originally not in his plan. He had only thought of that idea suddenly. He didn't intend to deal with the frail man initially. After all, it was his first time seeing him and sensing his threat. The reason why Huo Yuao took action was because he wanted to act when his ice explosion technique was the most effective. He controlled his ice explosion technique with the help of his spiritual detection. Huo Yuao didn't charge too far out then. He stopped and turned back, and struck just outside the palace walls. The reason why he had returned was because he saw the title Douluo elder abandoning his partner, leaving him exposed in the air. Huo Yuao wasn't fit to be called an ultimate soldier if he didn't seize the opportunity. Throwing the golden dragon spear from afar was Wang Qiu's ultimate skill. Huo Yuao wasn't as strong as her, but he wasn't weak either after fusing with the soul rings she had turned into. Furthermore, he had strengths that she didn't have too. Why did the golden dragon spear appear after the title Douluo saw a distortion in the dark sky? This was because Huo Yuao had used his imitation on the golden dragon spear just as he threw it out. This wasn't just a simple use of his spiritual type soul skill. It involved attention to detail. The process was very complex. First, he had to leave a streak of his spiritual sense and spiritual power on the golden dragon spear. He could only do this after his spiritual power materialized. In addition, he was only able to complete such a rapid fusion of his soul and spiritual powers after he had formed his soul core. After this, he imprinted his imitation onto his streak of spiritual power and used it just as he threw the golden dragon spear out. Simply speaking, his imitation was actually unleashed through his golden dragon spear. This was why it was completely concealed in the darkness. It only revealed itself when it arrived in front of the frail man in black. Even when it appeared, it was fully under Huo Yuao's control. This was because he still had to ensure that his spiritual power continued to move his golden dragon spear and complete the attack. The golden dragon spear thus absorbed the life energy of the frail man. His life energy was directly kept by Huo Yuao's spiritual power. On the golden dragon spear, it was like an avatar with its own spiritual power and life energy. This avatar controlled the spear to fly back to him as fast as possible. As it flew back, Huo Yuao's imitation was unleashed again. This allowed the golden dragon spear to move like the wind and instantly conceal itself. This was why Huo Yuao's attack actually drained a lot of his effort, even though it was just a simple strike. It was only completed through his immense spiritual control. As for the elder, he had discovered Huo Yuao too late. How was it going to be easy for him to pursue him now? The immense soul power undulations caused by the ice explosion technique didn't only blow apart all the surveillance soul tools in this region of the palace, but it also caused great interference to the aerial surveillance soul tools in the air. It was only possible to locate Huo Yuao using another spiritual type soul master. Huo Yuao moved through streets and alleys as he hid in the darkness. He only stopped after he was sure that he was in a safe place. Right now, his breathing was a little quick. However, there was an excited look in his eyes. Ultimate soldier. This was a true ultimate soldier, sneaking into the enemy's base, killing an influential figure and fleeing far away. From the start until the end, he wasn't even exposed. The enemy didn't even know who had made such an attack. This feeling was great. From the earlier all-around surveillance in the Heavenly Soul Empire's Imperial Palace, Huo Yuao had already clearly found out that there was only one spiritual type soul master in the entire palace. It was that guy. Without any soul tools, that guy wasn't able to pose a threat to him. Although spiritual surveillance soul tools could locate him, they still had to be controlled by soul engineers. Compared to soul masters, they weren't very adaptable. Moreover, they couldn't track him, unless the enemy could use spiritual surveillance soul tools in conjunction with oscillation and thermal detectors, as well as lock onto his position the moment he was detected. There was no way he could be detected, given current soul tool technology. Huo Yuao had always been monitoring the Sun Moon Empire's soul tool technology throughout this period of war. This was why he was so confident. When he landed in Juzi's trap the last time, it was because he had been too careless. He had underestimated the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion, which caused him to be exposed. But it was a good lesson. At least he wouldn't allow himself to be exposed in the future when it came to similar situations. His direct fighting abilities right now were already very strong. More importantly, he was great at concealing himself. This was actually the most terrifying part about him. The reason why Juzi thought that Huo Yuao would become her greatest enemy in the future was precisely because of this reason. Huo Yuao's ability to conceal himself made him much more dangerous than ordinary title Douluo. It was most terrifying when a person's traces couldn't be found. Moreover, given Juzi's understanding of Huo Yuao, she knew his potential. He possessed an ultimate martial soul, and he already had 7 soul rings. There was no doubt that he would become a title Douluo in the near future. A title Douluo with an ultimate martial soul was even more terrifying than a title Douluo who was an evil soul master. Huo Yuao entered through the window as usual when he returned to his hotel. He had already calmed down by now. After killing that spiritual type soul Douluo, he had managed to achieve his aim for this mission. However, this would have greatly alarmed the enemy too. During this period of time, the Sun Moon Empire would surely increase their surveillance in the Heavenly Soul Empire's Imperial Palace. This was inevitable, but could he continue to wait any further? The best way was naturally to wait for them to lower their guard before continuing his surveillance. The enemy might be more relaxed after a period of tension, which would then provide a great opportunity for him. However, Huo Yuao couldn't wait any further. There were still many things he had to do. He had to quickly gather information from here. Furthermore, through the earlier all-around surveillance, he was certain that neither Ma Xiaodao nor Tang were in the Imperial Palace. They were both holy ladies in the Holy Ghost Church, and they were very respected. If they were in Heaven City, they would surely be in the Imperial Palace. Since they weren't, the likelihood that they were in the city was very small. When he thought until here, Huo Yuao's good mood diminished slightly. Without being able to find Ma Xiaodao and Tanya, it meant that his most important target of this mission wasn't achieved. How could he be happy then? What should I do? Should I try to capture an evil soul master to gather information? Who are you? Al furrowed his brow. That was the stupidest idea. Perhaps it might be effective, but it wasn't going to be easy. In addition, those evil soul masters might not know where Tanya was, but it seemed like he just had to give it a go. He sat cross-legged and pondered for a moment. After this, he decided that he couldn't think of a better plan. It seemed like capturing an evil soul master and searching his memories was the best he could do. After deciding on this strategy, he had another goal to reach. He thought about it for a moment before he started to perfect his plan. If he wanted to find an evil soul master, the best place to do so was naturally the Imperial Palace. However, he had just caused a ruckus in the palace. The security in the palace was bound to be very tight now. Under such a circumstance, how could he possibly capture a lone evil soul master? This was a huge problem for him. Furthermore, the evil soul master that he captured couldn't be too weak either. Otherwise, it would be difficult to get any information from him. After formulating a plan, Hua Yua slowly entered into meditation and continued to absorb the manifold mysterious ice essence into his body. He felt as if his cultivation was improving by leaps and bounds following every session of meditation after he started to absorb the manifold mysterious ice essence. His soul power kept on getting stronger, and he was slowly becoming a soul Douluo. If not for the fact that he wasn't ready, he would really like to try out what standard his cultivation had reached. According to his own estimates, he should at least be rank 77 by now. This also meant that his soul power had improved significantly. He had reaped great rewards. The next morning, Hua Yua entered his spectral demiplane and fed the 3 bears. After this, he went to the streets again and proceeded in the direction of the Imperial Palace. As he walked the streets, he paid attention to all the chatter around him. Many people were discussing the explosive boom that came from the palace. It was even rumored that the perimeter of the palace was out of bounds right now. Hua Yua kept on walking towards the palace and only returned after making one round around it. He discovered that the person in charge of Heaven Do City from the Sun Moon Empire was still very rational. He didn't seal off the entire city or make it out of bounds because of what had happened last night. The only area that was out of bounds was the street that he was on yesterday. This was because this street was where a part of the palace walls had blown apart. It was under repair now. Apart from this, everything in the palace appeared to be fine, at least from the outside. He didn't survey the inside of the palace using his spiritual power. He had already unleashed his greatest spiritual power last night. There was no way the enemy wouldn't be wary of him. Any spiritual barriers or similar soul tools would certainly be in use now. If he carried out any spiritual detection, he would be sending himself straight into a trap. Although Hua Yua didn't really believe the Sun Moon Empire had any way of finding him, he wasn't going to take the risk. After returning to the hotel, Hua Yua called the Ice Bear King out from his spectral demiplane. Given his individual abilities, he wasn't really very impressive in Heaven Do City. However, it was different if he had Little Bai's help. Furthermore, he had some other plans. Grandpa, what kind of place is that? It's really fun. Those skeletons are really interesting, but why are they running away from me? Little Bai asked excitedly. Hua Yua hadn't set any boundaries for him in the demiplane. He had allowed him to bring Big Mao and Second Mao out to play. When Electrolux created this demiplane, he had made it so that the specters in the demiplane could evolve. Even Hua Yua didn't know where they got their energy from. According to the memories that Electrolux left behind, it should have its origins in spatial strength. As for how Electrolux managed to do that, he had no clue at all. It seemed to be a strength from another world. Unless his cultivation could reach that of Electrolux, there was no way he could possibly find any clues. Hua Yua said, "This is a demiplane that one of my teachers left behind for me. It's a parallel dimension of our world, and only I can open it. Since you like it here, I'll let you enter a few more times in the future. However, we've things to do now. You must follow my plan." Hua Yua recounted his plan to the Ice Bear King. He knew that the Ice Bear King was rather simple-minded and wouldn't be able to remember a plan that was too complex. This was why he tried to simplify the mission that he gave the Ice Bear King. As for the complicated stuff, he left it for himself. After settling the plan, Hua Yua and Ice Bear King remained in the hotel to rest. 2 days later, the streets of Heaven Do City were still very crowded. It was already evening now, and the sky had just turned dark. This was the time when business was booming for hotels and restaurants. Apart from those who were going home, there were a lot of people who were proceeding towards restaurants and eating places. Hua Yua slowly walked among the crowd. After 2 days of observation, the situation in the palace had already quieted down. The damaged palace walls had already been repaired. As for what was going on in the palace, he didn't manage to find out anything through his spiritual detection. Today was the day he was going to truly take action. The Imperial Palace was already within sight from afar. Hua Yua naturally walked towards it. After this, he sat in a small restaurant not far from the palace. He ordered some dishes and sat there alone, eating by himself. It was at this moment that a figure silently came to the outside of the palace walls. The light around his body was distorted. It was as if this figure had completely assimilated with the air. It was just that streaks of air could be seen slightly distorting under the dim night lights. If he revealed his figure right now, everyone who had ever seen him would be shocked. This was because he was also Hua Yua. Hua Yua slowly walked with his toes on the ground. He leapt up and arrived above the palace walls. He silently unleashed his spiritual detection towards the inside of the palace. Indeed, just like he had expected, the defensive installations in the palace weren't any different from before. After all, it was quite unrealistic to install more oscillation and thermal detectors. The palace was so huge. How could they possibly find so many more spiritual surveillance cell tools in such a short period of time? Hua Yua found a spot that the oscillation detectors didn't cover, exploiting it to sneak into the palace. He quickly moved into the depths of the palace. The number of patrolling guards hadn't been increased either. Perhaps the Sun Moon Empire thought that ordinary soldiers didn't have any effect on title Douluo. Hua Yua went going deeper and deeper into the palace. Everything seemed to be business as usual. His spiritual detection was controlled within 100 meters from him. He didn't carry out any detection on a large scale. He only stopped when he was around 500 meters from the center of the palace, where he silently hid in a dark corner. It was also at this moment that the air started to undulate a little. Following this, snow started to fall from the sky. At the start, it was only a few snowflakes, but slowly, the wind became stronger and stronger. More and more snowflakes started to fall. Patches of snowflakes were being blown about by the raging winds. In just a short period of time, the entire palace was covered in a blizzard. It was weird, but this blizzard only engulfed the inside of the palace. It didn't leak out to any other parts of the Heavenly Soul Empire. At this moment, the people who were passing by not far from the palace were shocked. It was their first time seeing the palace being engulfed by a blizzard. Such a phenomenon would only occur in the extreme north. Although Heaven Do City was quite close to the north, and it would also snow in the winter, it was impossible for there to be a blizzard. This blizzard was very strong. When the snowflakes scratched the structures in the palace, piercing scratching sounds could be heard. The inside of the palace was a mess right now. Many of the patrolling guards were hurt by the blizzard. Furthermore, the temperature in the palace was also falling dramatically. From the original 10 degrees Celsius, the temperature soon fell to negative 20 degrees Celsius. The confusion and mess in the palace worsened due to this extremely cold temperature. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.